I'm Diana.
And I'm Zach.
And we are the Farrier's Bellows, a podcast dedicated to bringing you games and tools to take your adventure further.
We're going to be talking about non-traditional indie RPGs, some that have been around for years, others that are newer, to take you beyond the ordinary.
Today, join us as we hide from the black helicopters and tinted window SUVs in Psi Run.
Our first segment is the Call to Adventure. Psi Run is a game that first came into existence in 2007 in the form of an ash can by Chris Moore and Michael Lingner. After that, it was adopted, fleshed out maybe, by McGay Baker into a full book that was published in 2011. That's the version that we played. The full book, it's a very pretty, kind of square cut, very thin book that has like these awesome mutants on the cover running from a helicopter crash. It's very intriguing as a cover.
Yeah.
This is a game that's about psychics. It's about superheroes. It is at its heart a game about a mystery and exploring mystery. It's a game about amnesiac mutants is what you are playing. Although they don't have to be mutants. They could be psychics, psionics, cyborgs, if that's the kind of story you want to tell. And they are on the run from mysterious Black Ops forces. If you want to play X-Men, Push, Runaways, or even The Matrix, this is the game for you. You're trying to survive with powers that you can't control while you're hunted by malevolent forces you don't understand while trying to figure out exactly who and what you are. There is a lot that you are coming into this game that you and your character don't understand, and together you are trying to figure it out.
So one way that the game kind of works towards you kind of figuring out what's going on, or I guess illuminates that that's the point of the game, is the character sheet. It is very bare bones. There's a spot for your name and for your apparent age, not for your actual age, but for your apparent age. Because again, you're an amnesiac. You don't know really anything about yourself. And the descriptor part where you kind of describe who you are and what you are, it states it on the character sheet. When I look in the mirror, I see blank. So what you know about yourself is super duper limited. There is not a lot of information for you to go on. But I would say about half of the character sheet is this section called I Have Questions, where you come up with up to 6 questions about yourself. And they don't have to be questions that you know the answer to. In fact, they should be questions you don't know the answer to. Questions like, what happened to my hand? Why am I green? Mm-hmm. What color? Why are my eyes that color? Like, why are my flames purple? Really anything that is related to your question, to your character.
How can I create flames? How can I create purple flames?
Exactly, yeah. There's a question about your powers. There's a question about your strengths and your weaknesses. The questions help build what kind of character you are.
And we'll talk about that a little bit more in our next segment. The other sheet is your risk sheet, and this is really the engine of the game. Anytime you roll, you're rolling a number of dice based on what you're doing and what's at stake. And then you're rolling 4 to 66, and you're placing them on this risk sheet, which is divided up into tables. So you're deciding what areas you're going to succeed in and what areas you're going to fail in. Mm-hmm. They're divided into your goal. So like, do you achieve your goal or not? Reveal, which is, do you remember anything from your past? And that gives you a chance to answer your questions. Psi, if you're using psychic powers, do they cause any trouble or do they work? Harm is, does anybody get hurt? And then you also have a section for chase, which is the people who are after you. Do they catch up? Are they closer? Do they catch anybody? And that is really the meat of the game. Anytime you're rolling, mm-hmm. you're allocating your dice onto this table to decide what you're willing to give up to get something else.
And it's you deciding mm-hmm. what is getting like the lower dice or what is going to go wrong. You decide that. The GM doesn't decide that, which is another really interesting mechanic and another way that this game kind of progresses forward. You are in charge of that story.
Yeah. This is a game that's created for single session or short session play, 2 to 3 sessions. Mm-hmm. And that's dependent on how many questions every character starts with. If you want to play in one game for 4 to 5 hours, everybody has 4 questions. Once one person has all their questions answered, the game immediately ends and everybody gets to do an epilogue. So if everybody has the full 6 questions, you could break it up into a few sessions. And that's pretty much the meat of the game. There's some other elements based on tracking how close the people chasing you are, but all in all, it's a very open-ended game with not a lot of bones to it. Do you want to talk about anything else before we go into things we liked?
Just really quickly, as you go through the game, we play with index cards of your current location. So you are building the world around you as you play the game as well, which is another really interesting, I don't know, different facet of this game. Like you kind of build, I mean, you do that with a lot of games, but you kind of build this one physically as you play it.
Yeah, you have a physical map of the world on the table that everyone can see. Everyone can see exactly how far away they are from the bad guys. And yeah, it's different than other games I've seen. I can't think of another one that tracks like location and distance in quite the same way. Let's move on to things that we liked, things mechanical and thematic that we enjoyed.
So we already kind of touched on it a little bit, but I really like that the game ends when someone answers all of their questions. Not when everyone answers all of their questions, not when a specific person answers all of their questions, not when the GM has like any random person who rolled really well and made that a focus or whatever. When they answer their questions, game's done. Doesn't matter if you're in the middle of a really important arc that you had for yourself, game's done. It's over. And so now you get to do an epilogue and it's done. And I just think that's so cool. I don't know. I really like it. It's different. It's different than a lot of other games.
Yeah. So inevitably, people end up having other goals in the game. The primary goal is escape, get to safety. I think most games that I play, at least one person wants to take the fight to the chasers, or has something else come up through discovery that they want their character to accomplish. This game is not about any of those other goals. This game is about figuring out who you are. And to that end, once you know, the game is over.
Yep.
And if you didn't answer all of your questions, if you didn't answer most of your questions, and someone else does, you end the game not knowing who your character is, which really incentivizes, when you have 1 6 and a couple 2s and you need to decide, well, do I put that 6 in reveal and get a question answered, or do I achieve my goal? Do I make sure that my psychic powers don't go out of control? Do I make sure that the chasers stay away? That timer is really effective at pacing and really effective at pushing you to do different things, things that aren't necessarily advantageous.
Yeah, absolutely.
One thing that I really liked is the risk sheet itself. We've talked about this a little bit. It's arguably a PBTA game in a way that I find a little bit hard to describe, other than it's running on the same sort of middling thing, good thing system that most Powered by the Apocalypse moves run on, while also giving you a sort of prompt for what happens when you choose those things, and then you get to run off of that prompt. I really like that the risk sheet divides up control over the narrative to different people. So for instance, on reveal, on a 1 to 3, if you put a 1 to 3 in reveal, you get no memory triggered, and the GM gets narrative control. On a 4 to 5, you get to answer one of your questions, but you don't actually get to decide the answer to that. Everyone else at the table does.
Yeah.
Only on a 6 do you get to write down the answer. Only do you get to narratively describe your own answer.
Right.
So you're giving everybody control, and everybody has equal control, but you get final say on who gets that control. So it's a very a self-propelling engine in a very collaborative way that I think works really well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think another kind of tool that the game uses to keep it really collaborative is that once a player rolls, they can't roll again until another player has already rolled. So if, I'm running away from the baddies and something else happens that's really cool and I want to be able to do something, use my power, I can't roll until someone else does a thing. So we have to work really collaboratively and think ahead, kind of strategically plan, so that the group as a whole can progress. You can't progress by yourself. You need the group to work with you. You have to work collaboratively in this game.
Yeah, I call that the volleyball rule. And I think it's a rule that most GMs usually try to adhere to in all games. But I like that it is explicitly mentioned in the text in this one. And for some reason, I feel better about enforcing it in Psi Run. I think it works very well in Psi Run in a way that I wouldn't necessarily like stick to heavily in, say, Dungeon World.
Yeah.
One thing that I liked is the question structure. The questions that you ask are similarly structured in a very open but leading way. You have to have one question about your powers, one question about your strengths and weaknesses, and one question about your circumstances. So one question about like, who am I? Why am I here? Why is my head wrapped in bandages? Like you said, you had a pyrokinetic, and one question was like, why are the flames that I make purple? And one question about your strengths and weaknesses. So like, I don't know. That one's a little bit harder to come up with a, oh, here's a good one. Why do I fear deep water? Was one that one of our players had. So you're giving everybody things to work with. You're giving your GM things to work with. You're giving yourself things to work with without being too limiting or without being too leading, right? There's a lot of wiggle room with all of those questions.
Yes. I think I like that a lot. The amount of wiggle room there is with the questions, which is kind of surprising because I don't open-end think like that. My brain is a little bit more concrete. But I do really enjoy how open-ended those questions can be, because I think it makes every time you play the game completely different, even if you're playing with the same people. It's every time it's different because the questions can be whatever. Yeah.
This last time, one of the players had a question, what is the Kessler program? And the Kessler program was just something that they made up for the sake of their question.
Right.
And it ended up being a major plot point for everybody in the game.
Yep.
And I think that is where this game really sings. And we'll get to that a little bit more later on. Anything else that you liked?
Mechanically, we can get into it a little bit later, but thematically, I really enjoyed how you can always use your power. I enjoyed that a lot. I think you don't need to eat a special food or do a special thing. I don't know. In some games, you have to like recharge your power, right? You have to like recharge your magic. You have to get your spell slots back or something. Like you don't have to do that. You can always use your power. It just might not work the way you need it to, because that's the risk sheet. That's where the risk sheet comes in. But your power is always available to you. It is always there for you to use. You don't have to you don't have to go pray and recharge your spell slots.
Or in like a vampire game, don't have to feed and then get your energy back.
Yes, exactly.
The only thing limiting your ability to use your power is your own anxiety about it going awry.
Exactly. Exactly. Like mechanically, the game says you can use your power. You as a player have to be like, maybe not. Maybe this isn't the instance that I blow everybody up.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. So I really like that.
One thing that I really liked is the ambiguous nature of the chasers. The game does not explain what the people chasing you are. That's part of the sense of discovery of the game. You need to learn who is chasing you. Or not necessarily, you don't have to learn. You could go the whole game without caring.
That's true.
But you don't have it set in stone. It's not a set dressing. And I think that's really interesting. Our games, they've always been very different, but they're always kind of this weird, sterile, scary, kind of like black sunglasses at night group.
Yeah, they're definitely Men in Black.
Yes. But even though they always end up sort of in that field, they're always very different from one another.
Oh, yeah.
In tone, in feel, in goals, which I think is very cool. I like that is another thing that's left open about the game. I think it'd be very easy to say, like, the government is chasing you,
right,
or a secret research program is chasing you.
Right.
But it lets you discover that on your own.
I also really like the story that the players are telling kind of changes the chaser story as well, which I think is just like a really cool little bit of power the players get.
So what are some things that you had questions about?
So I know I was giving them the big thumbs up earlier, but the questions, I don't think open-endedly like that. And sometimes I need examples, and sometimes I need like a list to pick from, and then I can expand on it, and then I can move forward from it. But like a large list, and like 1 or 2 examples doesn't usually cut it for me. I usually need like a lot, like 10 examples per type of question is kind of how my brain works.
Yeah. In the game's defense, it is not skimpy on examples.
Right.
It has, I think, 4 or 5 example characters, each with 3 to 4 example questions. But that is different than, say, Dread, which lines every page with
Right.
example questions.
Right. And I, specifically for the questions, need like a huge bank of questions to come from, because those characters were so different than the character that I was creating, or any character that I could create. I need more example. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not trying to say they don't have examples, because I know that they do, but those example questions still didn't do it for me. I needed to wait until everyone went around and explained their questions, and I still had the group help me create questions, because it wasn't enough for me. I needed a little bit more concrete statements. I just needed more concrete stuff. Like, that's a Diana issue, but it's an issue that I had that I'm sure other players, especially newer players, will probably also have.
I think one thing that you expressed some difficulty with when we played was also coming up with a power.
Yeah.
We've barely even talked about the powers. When you make a character, you also determine very broadly what your power is. So control over my size could be a power.
Right.
Generating flames could be a power. I make copies of myself. And you start off with it very broad and general, and then over the course of play you discover, okay, this is how it works, this is how it looks, this is how it could go wrong, which always turns out very well. But I know that you really wanted like a list of superpowers to choose from.
Yes.
And that is one thing that I don't think the book offers as many examples of. For someone who is not familiar with superheroes, comics, psychics, like psychic powers or whatever, I could see that being difficult, being as open-ended as it is.
Right. And I only have like popular media to go off of. So like, and even then, like, I can only think of the big tropes, right? Like fire starting, mind reading. Copies never even occurred to me, and someone at our table did it, and that one's pretty popular. I couldn't even think of it. It didn't even occur. Flying never occurred to me.
Flying didn't occur to you?
Flying didn't occur to me. Like, my brain just doesn't line up that way. I don't make those connections to possible. Like, I've seen Push 1,000 times. It's like a great movie. I love Push, but I didn't choose any of those powers because it didn't occur to me that I could choose those powers. Do you know what I mean? My brain. It's my brain. It's not like those power. It's not like that can't possibly happen.
You need to work on those lateral thinking puzzles.
Yeah, I know. My brain doesn't do it. My brain doesn't do it. And a list, just lists of things.
One thing that I had a question about is a rules question. A lot of the results say other players have first say. And my question is always, does that include the GM?
Right.
Because I don't think it's, in my read-throughs of the book, I haven't seen it explicitly stated whether or not that includes the GM, whether or not the GM is another player. Because the difficulty with that is that a lot of times players at the table will just naturally look to the GM as a GM. So when I'm the GM and I get that other players have first say, I might have an idea and really want to contribute to the discussion. But I have found that when I do, a lot of the players will like look at that as word of God,
right?
As like the GM saying that this is the thing, and they might want to add or play onto that. But I have found that when it says other players have first say and the GM chips in, the GM's always gets accepted. Yeah. Which feels kind of buggy to me, but also as a GM, I would want to be able to contribute. Right. So I don't know really how to balance that. I feel like it's probably largely a table thing, if nothing else.
It does feel like a table thing, but it could be something that's explicitly said by the book so that you could literally hold it up and be like, it says it right here. My word is not over yours. We're just a part of the team. Like sometimes having it written down by the creators, like if it's in the book, then it trumps you. Like if it's in the book, it trumps you as the GM. So if it's in the book, then it might make it a little, not to say that they have to put it in the book, but it might make it a little clearer to people at the table.
Anything else that stood out to you?
I really like the fact that it's a small book. I like that it says they recommend 30 minutes to read it, and that's it. Like, I love that it's a small book. I love that it's so easy to kind of pick up. I love the ambiguity of the backstories because and the collaboration, all of that rolls together to mean that it's not a very scary game to play for first-time players.
Yeah.
And that is a huge thing for me because we're always introducing role-playing games to friends and to people we know. And so having this be a really not like intense game, there's not a lot of rules, there's not a lot of stuff they have to follow, they don't need to each buy their own book. Like, it is a very easy game to pick up if you're picking up games for the first time. And I really like that about this game.
Yeah, I would agree. I would say this is one of the best games I think that you could introduce somebody to role-playing with, because you don't need to come to the table with a lot. It is incredibly easy to prep as a GM.
Yeah.
It takes 30 minutes to read through the book to remind yourself what the very basic rules are and get started. It's a small book, quick to read, and it's really easy to pick up and play.
Yes. Yeah. Which is phenomenal.
Some things that stood out to me are the comic strip style tutorial. The kind of examples of play are all done in a script style, which feels very much like an actual play or a replay of these example characters with like comic book art explaining what they're doing in the game. And I think it's very evocative. I think it's very helpful. I also really love how evocative the cover of the book is, which I mentioned already, and the tutorial characters throughout the book are. I think they're an excellent thing to use, to your point of needing questions, needing ideas for powers. Like the cover has this girl who's flying and she's got this bandage over her head. It has this green alien looking character who has their power is going haywire. It's just very evocative. It shows you everything that the game is going to be about. And they do a good job of showing you the versatility of the type of game you can play.
McGay Baker had no idea that Diana would be reading this and that Diana would need so many more resources. She had no idea. It's very good, though. There are examples and there are resources in the book.
Yeah, and those resources are also out there, especially for superpowers. I mean, you can do quick Googling and get superpowers.
I didn't, but you can.
I also really like the quick start rules, which are basically all I've ever played with. I've never played a more than one session of this game. And the quick start rules are very basic. They're essentially limit the number of questions to 4 questions and go. And that keeps it well paced. It keeps it quick. It keeps it short. And it's a great game just to pick up when you want to play something and don't want to do a lot of prep. Our next segment is Approach the Inmost Cave. So for this week, I wanted to talk about mystery in games and how well Psi Run does mystery.
Yeah.
When play begins, everyone has a lot of questions and no one, not the GM, not the players, knows what the questions are. You have questions about your characters. You have questions about their backstories, who they are. You have questions about their powers. No one knows what the setting is like. No one knows where their powers come from, how their powers work, how they even look when they're in action. You might know that your character flies, but you don't know how they fly, what their powers look like, how they work.
What are the consequences of your flying? Like, yeah.
And the whole game is based around discovering the answers to these things. And I think it works better than basically any other mystery game that I've seen. I think a lot of games have trouble with mystery. It's hard for a GM to write or convey mystery by the very nature of pre-planning and trying to communicate the mystery to players.
Yes.
When a GM has an idea for a mystery and they're trying to explain it, you're relying on a lot of things. You're relying on proper communication, that the things that you want to put emphasis on are coming through, that players are going to pick up or not pick up on hints, or hints might be too obvious and the mystery ends up getting solved in 10 minutes. There are a lot of ways for a mystery to go wrong that end up with this disconnect between GM and players.
Right. Yeah, no, and I think this game does a really good job of building on that because the GM doesn't have an idea, and the GM might have a slight idea, and the players might have slight ideas about their characters, but you're asking these questions without knowing the answers. Like, the game builds mystery into it by just keeping it so open-ended, and I think that's how it succeeds. But if you had like a murder mystery and you know who the murderer is, you can't play this game. You know the answer. You can't you can't move forward with it. That's how it does mystery. So that's why I think it does mystery so well, is that it's a mystery to everybody. If you have an idea, you can't play this game. Or if you have a solid solution, you can't play this game.
Yes, and the game actively discourages having those hard solutions, which solves a lot of problems of mystery. And also, it does mystery in an interesting way, right? When you read a mystery, it is interesting to you because you are the only player in that interaction, and you don't have all the answers, right? The answers exist outside of the narrative, for all intents and purposes, as you're reading the mystery. And that's what this game does. It takes the answers out of the actual text. So you're not worrying with having to know the answers and trying to piecemeal out the information to the group in a way that maintains the mystery. So you don't have to worry about how that information that exists in the background is going to affect play. I think there's also the issue of when you have a mystery around your own character, making sure that the other players care about the mystery of your character.
Yeah. If you have all of the answers to this mystery and you're just trying to slowly give it out to people, like the other players around your team, like they can tell that you're doing that. It makes it harder to interact with the world around you that they have control over. It makes it really difficult. And if you don't know what your character is doing, if you don't have that information, it can be really anxiety inducing for some players. For Diana, it can be very anxiety inducing to not know why your character does the things that they do or how they do the things that they do. That mystery on your own end can be really problematic for some people.
Are you saying that this isn't anxiety inducing? That Psi Run?
No, because everyone is in the same boat. Like if we were all playing characters in a different game and everybody knew about their mystery, they had their own little mysteries and everybody knew about it. Creating my own mystery and being able to explain it to people would drive me nuts if everybody else could do it. Does that make sense? Am I explaining myself well? I don't think I am.
It's the collaborative part that makes you feel like you're more able to explore not understanding something because everybody's collaboratively not understanding what's going on.
That's exactly it. Thank you for taking the jumble that was my words and making that make sense.
No, it made sense. And I think part of that is that shared collaborative control, right? By making sure everyone has a stake, not just that everyone's in the same boat and that they are a fish out of water. Everyone has a stake in the mystery at hand.
Right.
Everyone wants to know how your character got this way because it might help them understand how their character got this way.
Exactly.
And because at any time you could be asked to answer a question for someone else, you care about their character. If it was only about solving your own problems and only you had control, so maybe we should move into how does this game attempt to solve the problem of mysteries in games. One way it does that is giving everybody at the table control over your character's answers.
Yes.
Because I know at any point I could be asked to help the person who talks to flowers understand why they can only control poisons. And so my mind is already running with like, if I get to answer this question, how can I do it? And at the same time, I know that there's a possibility someone else is going to get to answer my questions.
Right.
So I legitimately don't know. And I don't want to get hung up on an answer because to get hung up on an answer, to have an idea for an answer and then hand over control with that is just going to be disappointing.
Yeah.
So I feel more comfortable being blind about the things that my character has amnesia about.
Right. That built-in buy-in for other people's characters is how I think this game ends up doing mystery so well. Because you care about the other players, because you care about where this story is going, because to care about them is to care about yourself. To further their mission and to further their understanding of themselves is to further yourself, is to gain more information for you. That built-in buy-in, I think, is a huge part of why this game runs so well.
Yeah. And a great example of that, in the last game we played, one person had a question that was, what is the Kessler program? And we answered the Kessler program was this experimental college, it was like a university.
It was a university experiment
that
turned into its own giant thing.
Yeah. So we had established that for one of the players that like this is what the Kessler program was. This is like who was chasing us. And one of the other players had a question that was something along the lines of like, why do I have a wedding ring tan? Mm-hmm. And when we answered it, we discovered that she had been married to the head of the Kessler program.
Right.
So it turned into this whole thing where everybody was getting interconnected. All of these questions were falling in on themselves in a way that felt very fulfilling, felt it really sung. And I found that every game of this works. Even when you're playing with new players who are new to improv, are new to role playing, they care about these answers and they care about playing off other people's answers.
Right.
So you get this really great coherent story. And if there are things that don't fit well, they're easy to kind of just like disregard. Like it's easy to drop some details in favor of the details that really sing.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the risk sheet really pushes you to do that. The risk sheet itself, like mechanically the game itself really pushes you to do that. It really pushes you to favor discovering things and giving control to either yourself or to the players and working collaboratively to answer these questions. Like the goal of this game is not to get away from the chasers. It's to discover something about yourself. It's to discover everything about yourself. And that is incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah. So the way the risk sheet is set up and the way it's laid out is the first table is your goal. The second table is answering a question. And it hurts to have your dice laid out in front of you and have to decide, what am I going to spend my good rolls on?
Right.
Am I going to spend them on my goal? Am I going to spend them on my psychic powers? Am I going to not get hurt? Or am I going to let myself get hurt so that I can answer a question, so that I can discover something new?
Right.
It is difficult to make that decision, to try to allocate dice in a way that will make you happy. And I think that it is difficult in a good way.
Yeah.
And especially because essentially answering questions is how you quote unquote win this game.
Right.
Like you said, that's the goal.
I will say from a player's point of view, when you're all sitting at the table, it can sometimes be easy to forget that is the goal. Like especially early on in the game, you're thinking, oh, I just need to get away from the chasers, or I really need my powers to work right now. Like I have this 1/2, I need to throw it somewhere. I'm going to put it in reveal. When really, you might want to put reveal in your powers going crazy. Like that might be really where you want it to go. Especially in the beginning, it can be hard to forget that the point of the game is to discover things about yourself. But as the game goes on, it becomes more and more clear that that's what you need to be doing. You need to be discovering things about yourself.
Yeah. I find that once somebody answers a question, everybody else at the table kind of like goes, oh, that was cool that you figured something out, and that you figured out, you just built the world and you built the chasers and you built yourself.
Yep.
I want that. And so the longer the game goes, the more people are willing to be like, I'm going to fail this goal. You know, I'm not going to get this thing that I want so that I can get an answer to my question.
Right.
And part of that is because you're starting to compete for like, I want to answer all my questions first. I want to have control over the epilogue.
Right.
And part of that is just, I want to know. I really want to know that once the adrenaline of, because every game starts with a crash, and your characters are at a crash site. Whatever was transporting them has crashed, and everybody has a chance to run. And the chasers are there, and there's spotlights on them, and there might be guns on them, and you're booking it. And it's very much like that scene in the movies where the adrenaline starts to fade away, and you're like, well, shit, what do I do now? Who am I? I have all these questions now. How do I get them answered?
Yep.
It is very tense in a good way.
Yes.
I would say that Psi Run does mystery better than any other game I know, except for maybe Inspectors.
I think they do them differently.
They both do them very differently, but they both do mystery through handing off narrative control.
Yes.
And giving everyone at the table an equal opportunity to dictate or narrate how the mystery is coming into focus. They both start with very blurry outlines that allow everybody at the table to have a say into how they get focused.
Yeah. And that might be the secret to creating a mystery game.
I absolutely,
no one has the answer.
I absolutely think so.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think there's a lot of games that simultaneously give you that freedom and that structure to do that. I don't think you could replicate that in a lot of games.
Yeah.
I think Psi Run and Inspectors do it amazingly.
I agree.
So do you have any things that you like are wondering about? Like any potential changes you would make to this game? Any alterations you would like to tinker with?
Well, I think it was the same thing that we had talked about when we had played Inspectors. But what if you tried to play this game without a GM, right? Because there is that collaborative storytelling, right? And you're building this world together. And a lot of times the GM is just a part of the table anyway. Like, what if you just took out the formal GM role and kind of just played this game GM-less with a couple people having the rule books in front of them?
GM-less Psi Run is something that I've wanted to try ever since I got this game because I think it would work amazingly well.
Right.
I don't see any real reason for there to be a GM in this game. I think Inspectors, you need a GM. You need somebody playing out the business and the NPCs.
Yeah.
I think a shared GM game of Psi Run would work amazingly, but I have not tried it myself. But because the risk sheet basically gives you all the options for every possible outcome of a roll, everyone can work together to determine how that happens. It's so collaborative already.
Right.
I don't think a GM is necessary for this game.
Yeah.
I say without ever actually having tried it. That's my goal. Our next segment is Return with the Elixir. So this is other books, movies, games, music that would inspire or also explore these ideas in a similar or different way. So Diana, what kind of things did you come up with?
The Jason Bourne series.
Obviously.
It's like so obvious, right? Like his superpower is being a super spy. But it starts with him being an amnesiac and discovering things about him. Like literally it is Psi Run. It is Psi Run in the real world.
I've never seen any of the Jason Bourne movies.
Stop it.
Does he discover answers to his questions while punching people? Because that's seriously?
Yep.
Like he punches somebody and has like a flash of...
Oh, no.
Oh, okay.
Well...
Because it's kind of how it works in this. You're
is
kind of supposed to use like the thing that you did during the roll to kind of like...
trigger a...
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say, it has been a while since I watched the Jason Bourne series. But I think I think he gets flashes of memory. And it might be when he's punching people.
Cool.
It's entirely possible.
Do you know when the Jason... I wonder...
It's older.
I don't think Jason Bourne is in the Appendix N of Psi Run, but I would not be surprised if it was part of it.
I watched it while in college. So I believe that it is older than the book. I don't know
Okay.
if it's older than the ash can, but it is older than the book.
Interesting. One that I cited is one that I think probably a lot of people slept on, and that is the movie Push.
Yes.
Starring Chris Evans?
Yes. And Dakota Fanning when she was like a Lilin.
Yeah, you're right. I always forget that.
And a Portuguese actress, Camilla somebody or other.
Push is a movie that it's kind of an X-Men knockoff.
It's so dark.
Yeah, it's this,
So good.
But it's also like tonally it's very dark,
Yeah.
but it's very like high contrast.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of like very vibrant like greens and yellows.
Mm-hmm.
And it's basically just about people with psychic superpowers dueling it out. And some have signed on to this shady organization and others are trying to fight for freedom and run away and just live their lives. I highly recommend Push. I stupidly enjoy that movie.
Oh, it's amazing. But the movie came out in 2009, so it's possible that it influenced a little bit.
Which movie?
Push.
Oh, really?
Push came out in 2009.
Okay, interesting.
So there's that. Another... This is admittedly very cheesy. This is a very cheesy series. But there was a 2 or 3 season series that I found on Netflix called Dark Matter. And it, again, starts with people waking up without remembering why they woke up where they are. And kind of discovering their deep, dark pasts and secrets as the series goes on.
I've not watched Dark Matter.
It's bad.
Is
it's
it?
not good. It's not good. It's bad. But it's on Netflix, so...
I put Logan, the movie.
Yeah.
Which is sort of based off the comics Old Man Logan, but is also very different. And I think in a lot of ways better than the comic Old Man Logan. If you haven't seen Logan, it is the last Hugh Jackman Wolverine movie in which he is old, and for some reason mutants have stopped being born, which I think is a very understated mystery of that movie. I think it is very impressively subtle how they handle that in the movie. That they never explicitly say, like, I don't think they ever explicitly say why mutants stopped being born, or they just kind of imply it towards the end.
Right.
But it is about a group of mutants on the run. Less of the amnesiac thing, but superpowered people on the run trying to escape for freedom from shady government forces.
Yeah.
And very well done. One of the only X-Men movies that I enjoyed.
Along that same vein, there is a show on Fox called The Gifted.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And it's about X-Men.
Well,
on TV.
That actually, yeah, that is an X-Men title.
Yeah. But it's the dark organization, and the father's working for them, or maybe, I don't know, I haven't watched it.
Well, they're running from that's like Mutant Registration Act era X-Men, right?
Yeah. And like the kids of this father who's like all about it are mutants, and so now they're on the run, and there's all this stuff. So like, yeah. Yeah. My last one is Sense8, which I can't believe you didn't put on your I didn't put it on because you put it on your list.
I don't like Sense8 all that much.
I love Sense8.
Well, okay, I shouldn't say I don't like Sense8. Sense8's okay.
You don't like it as much as I clearly do.
Yeah. I would have liked it better as like a science fiction slice of life. If they had cut out the mystery and action, I would have liked it more. But as it stands, it is a mystery action 2-series and a movie show about a group of 8 people who share a psychic connection and are on the run from a shady corporate organization. Yeah. I think more than any of these other ones, the chasers in Sense8 are the chasers that I tend to gravitate towards in Psi Run.
Oh, yeah. Hands down. Very shady, very dark in the distance. They show up every once in a while.
They're always wearing like full body hazmat suits. It's like the all white hazmat suit while also carrying an AK.
Yeah.
That for some reason always gets to me. Like, I don't know what it is. I think it's because I equate like hazmat suit with research, and then while carrying heavy firearms, it's always like this weird dissonant, like, what's going on here? What is your job? What are you doing? That always, like, I don't know. I have a very visceral reaction to that, and I think they are the perfect chasers in Psi Run.
I completely agree with you. They're so mysterious and so like villainous. You just have to see a still image of that, and you're like, oh, you're the bad guy.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even know how or why, but you're like, you're the bad guy.
You know there's something shady going on there. Right. Our next part of Return with the Elixir is a story that we'd like to tell.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at what you've written here.
Yep.
And could you explain it?
Sure. It's not surprising at all what I've written, but I feel like I would really like to play this game and tell these stories with a really heavy emphasis on romance. And I mean it very much in the same way that Sense8 would call its orgy scenes as romance.
I was going to say, so basically you want the Sense8 orgies.
Yes, but with more mystery, like about who you are. That's what I want. So I want to tell a story much like Kristen Feehan writes her romance novels, or Karen Marie Moning. Moning? I think it might be Moning. I always say Moning, but I think it's Moning. And there's just a lot of, like, there's always like a big bad organization. There's always some big deep mystery that you're learning about piece by piece, little bit by little bit. But while you're learning it, you're boning. And like, I want boning. I want more boning. And like, lovey-dovey moments, but boning. I want more boning.
Can you say that a few more times? I think
boning with moaning.
The pop on the pop filter, those plosives. Gotta really get those through.
I want to bone with Monin and Feehan.
Well, okay. So my question would be, what would you want to do to emphasize the romance elements? Would that just be something that you would want the group to kind of like talk about, okay, this is the kind of tone I want. I want us to have some sort of romantic entanglement in addition. Like, yeah,
I kind of feel like it should just be another section on the risk sheet. Like another little, like, a block pocket.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's just like romance. And then, 5 to 6, you get to tell the romantic story the way that you want to.
Or
4-2. I don't know.
I mean, I think we could say something like how the relationship grows or the relationship health, or like.
Are you boning?
No.
On a 6, you're boning.
No, I was thinking maybe a moment of emotional honesty.
Yeah. To kind of build that tension a little.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think...
That's how I would do. I wouldn't do it. Like, I mean, obviously, you have that conversation with your group. What kind of story do we want to tell? I wouldn't tell a boning story with nuns, but like, you could. I've known some nuns. But I would add it, and then it becomes a part of that collaborative storytelling where everybody kind of gets to pick, well, I'm specifically going to bomb this relationship because I don't need it to figure out what's going on for me.
I like that.
You know what I mean? Like, that's how I would do it.
Yeah, no, that would be interesting, having another table for the relationship.
And honestly,
I like that idea.
In my little section, I wrote Kristen Feehan, but really it's more like Karen Marie moaning. And none of you have any idea who I'm talking about.
That.
Okay, most of you probably don't know.
She's a very popular romance author.
Moaning is, but I don't know. I don't feel like very many people read romance novels the way that I do. I really go deep into that fiction, that heavy fantasy. I go deep into that heavy fantasy. And that's not quite as popular as it used to be. But anyway.
My story that I would like to tell
I'm very interested in this.
Are you actually?
Yes, because I don't know what it is.
All right, I'm about to flaunt very little nerd cred. I would like to tell a X-Men House of M story. Mm-hmm. House of M is an alternate reality X-Men world in which Magneto and his family are I really want to say he's the king, but the royal family of an island called Genosha. And it's an X-Men story in which the mutants have a homeland and they are safe there, and all of this island nation of Genosha, everyone is a mutant. It is where mutants are no longer persecuted, and that's kind of like the whole idea of this like alternate reality. And a lot of the storylines have to deal with like international relations between mutant homeland Genosha and mutant persecuting United States and like stuff like that. And it's really cool. I would really like to do a story in which the players are fugitives in Genosha. Ooh. And so I think it would be very interesting to see the players dealing with their amnesia and their superpowers, but having the superpowers not be weird or out of place. Yes. Have their superpowers be just a normal thing that everyone in the country has. Mm-hmm. But the problem is, for some reason, the government is after them. Because that's another thing. Like, a lot of the Genosha stories are like, one of the X-Men from the real world timeline end up in this alternate Genosha, and they're Magneto's hunting them or something. Doing that where everybody has these superpowers and everybody is the same in that way. Yeah. And I don't know if that would mess with the idea of persecution that this game kind of toys with. I don't think it really commits to that as a theme.
But that might be why you could do this.
Yeah.
Because it's not a heavy theme in the game.
I don't know if that would mess with any themes or kind of make it feel less powerful in some ways. But to me, this game has always been more about the mystery than it is about the theme of persecution. Mm-hmm. So I think playing with the mystery in a setting in which you are not simultaneously being persecuted would be very interesting to me.
Yeah, that was good. Good nerd cred.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
I don't think that is. I think everyone would know moaning. I think more people probably know about Genosha than know about moaning. I probably got something wrong too. I'll probably get angry tweets. Our last segment is Farewells and Gratitude. The Farrier's Bellows is a production of The Gauntlet. You can find us on Twitter at GauntletRPG. You can also find us on our website at gauntlet-rpg.com. We're also on Patreon at patreon.com/gauntlet, where you can contribute to The Gauntlet and support more great shows like ours.
We want to say thank you to our editor, Zach B. You can also find us on iTunes. Please rate and subscribe to us there. We would really appreciate it.
You can follow us on Twitter at Farrier's Bellows. Talk to us and talk about us. We would love to hear from you. I especially want to hear if you've played Psi Run lately and how it went. If you've toyed with any of these things and kind of how your group did.
Until next time, you cannot dream yourself into a character. You must hammer and forge yourself into one.
Remember to not forget.